Hey everybody, this is Perch. All right, a bunch of ideas swirling through kind of my head as I've released a number of videos, a number of you have given comments. This isn't a video kind of addressing all the recent videos, but on some level, it might to some extent. So first off, let me start from a slightly unusual place. The movie Andor, or sorry, rather the Disney Plus television series Andor, which is not a movie but is somehow 8 hours worth of movie carved up across a bunch of episodes in a streaming service. Um, if you haven't paid attention to the news, there was an event that happened in Andor, namely sexual assault. And the first I took wind of this was not actually watching the show. It was actually when people started sending me emails saying, how do you feel? And by the way, they wrote the email this way. How do you feel about Star Wars wandering into the territory of S space A star? They wouldn't spell out sexual assault. I'm not sure why, but anyway, they wouldn't actually put that in the mail. So they're like uh, censoring themselves in the question, which I found really weird. And I can never fully get over that. Uh, but and believe it or not, this is going to lead to a bigger thought on comics in general. So apparently, in Andor season 2, there is a scene where a Imperial soldier attempts rape, and the character is a survivor, battles her way back from that. I don't know. To the recording of this video, which is third week of April, whatever. Um, I apparently this just happened. I haven't watched the episode. I will probably watch this series. I wasn't a huge fan of season 1. Lots of people were. That's fine. I kind of have gotten tired of Star Wars, not for woke things or any of that, but just I'm waiting for there to be a new story to tell, and we haven't. I haven't seen it. And when I say a new one, we had the Acolyte. That didn't. It was funny. It didn't feel like a new story to me. Yes, there were twins. Yes, there was the planet of lesbians and all the rest, but it just didn't. No part of it felt like uh, anything new. It still felt tired. Like every beat of that series felt like something I'd seen before. There was no subversion of expectations while they were subverting expectations. It just wasn't there. So anyway, I'm waiting for something new out of Star Wars, and in general, I'm not sure what I want out of Star Wars anymore. When I was a kid, I loved it. I went to those movies and imagined myself as a young child flying down the corner of the Death Star, getting ready to blow some shit up. I had the toys. I had the little weird action figures where the lightsaber came out of their arm, and I did that. I had the Boba Fett where I bought it early, and so you push a little button, it would fire a little piece of plastic, and if you aimed it right into a friend's eye before they fixed that toy. Anyway, I had that stuff. I had the weird Death Star toy with the trash compactor and the little foam bits. I didn't know how lucky I had it. Anyway, and then I watched the prequels, and they were terrible. I'm a grown adult, and I'm watching those prequels. I'm like, God, these are just awful. And then watched episodes 7, 8, and 9. And I was like, 7 was like, all right, it's not bad. It feels like kind of a greatest hits rehash, but okay. And then 8 and 9 were just awful. And so and that's just where it's kind of landed. I've watched some of the Disney Plus series, but with each successive showing, I just care less and less and less. And so the takeaway I have from this, which is different from some of you, is I've outgrown it. And when I say outgrow, I don't mean like maturity or age. I just mean my interests have moved beyond it. I just don't care. And I'm sure there's something Star Wars that could do to bring me back, but a sexual assault in Andor season 2 is not going to do it. But anyway, I get these mails. So I vaguely kind of look into what's going on, and I see a bunch of people with this perspective. The sexual assault is no place. It has no place in Star Wars. And I found that comment a little weird. Now, that comment, if I have to put a tag on it, seems to be coming from a cross section of people who are, anti SJW or whatever, and SJW. Both sides are kind of saying this. And I thought that was weird because this is happening in a universe where there's a genocidal killing planet space station that blows up billions of people at once. And I'm not saying that sexual assault is a good thing by any stretch of the imagination, but annihilating an entire planet with a billion people on it feels worse to me. I mean, at least there's hope of recovery and some level of kind of, moving on with your life. With one, the other, it's like billions of people died in an instant. I think that was it. Million voices screaming out in pain and then silenced. I think was Obi-Wan's words, right? Something like that. So I found that kind of weird, and then also I found it weird because I don't know what you think was going on in Return of the Jedi, but Jabba the Hutt wasn't like imprisoning women and then dressing them up in bikinis and chaining them by the neck to his chair and licking them in the face for, as a sign of respect. Like that wasn't, he wasn't doing good things. Now, so by the way, I posted something like this. A lot of you objected to it. Got really like, how dare you? That wasn't what Jabba was up to. Oh, fuck yeah, that's exactly what he was up to. Yes, it was. It's like, well, as a kid, I didn't think that. Okay, fair enough. As a kid, when I watched Return of the Jedi, I didn't think that either. But as I grew older, I'm like, oh yeah, that was what's going on there. That was exactly what was going on there. And let alone behind the scenes when the cameras weren't rolling, and apparently Carrie Fisher was just high on cocaine, God rest her soul, half the time in that metal bikini, but whatever. My point in all this is this activity is not new to Star Wars. It's been a part of that universe. So why is Andor season 2 different? And there is a reason it's different. The reason is in Andor season 2, apparently we get a bunch of commentary from the character like saying this, and kind of they wanted to kind of linger on it and really portray it as a more realistic assault. Whereas in Return of the Jedi, you had, Jabba the Hutt, licking Leia and kind of dragging her over to his chair, and eventually she chokes him to death. Like, that's the difference. The difference is in one, well, it would be like if in Return of the Jedi, if you remember watching that movie, the heroes get away from Tatooine and they fly up into space. You've got Lando there, and you've got, Han, who's regaining his eyesight, and you've got Chewie and Luke and R2-D2 and 3PO. And if they had spent 5 minutes of screen time on the Millennium Falcon as it's flying off to meet up with the rebels in the little consolidation of spaceships, if Leia would have had a long conversation about her feelings on being assaulted by the giant worm creature, and it was a moment where they all got to express themselves, that didn't happen in Return of the Jedi. It basically, she was thrown into a bikini, she was yanked around a bunch, she got kind of the feeling from the earlier slave girl that Jabba owned that he was probably doing stuff. She didn't like it, so she had the monster eat her, and not in a good way. And then they moved on. And the reason is Andor decided to kind of linger on the moment. And that's really the difference. The difference was in how the whole thing was portrayed. Now, I'm not saying that, you need to whitewash or kind of, make sexual assault pleasant in order to sell, fantasy movies. Okay, where is this video going? Anyway, but that's a difference that people need to really understand, is that if you're doing something that is science fiction all ages, or superhero movies all ages, or whatever it happens to be, it means you lose the ability to go into depth on some of these topics. If you're writing a comic book about Superman, and Superman's flying around and he's shooting laser beams out of his eyes and he's weak to kryptonite and everything else, then you can't do a Watchmen-like story inside of Superman and have it still work for the character. And this is a really important point in comics is, within Marvel and DC, they've done exactly this. You've had writers come in and give a bold, edgy take. It's why a number of people, if you've ever been in a comic shop, people have been debating the, Killing Joke. There's the scene where kind of implies that maybe Barbara was raped by the Joker and his goons. It's left open to interpretation, but the possibility is certainly there that went on. And so the debate that often goes on to a comic shop is this what should be happening in a comic book of Batman? Like, is that really the place to do this kind of stuff? And the answer is probably not. It's probably not the best way to, have a mass market all ages comic, but comics have done this and they have gone there. And once you go there, it's hard to go back. It's hard to put the genie back inside the bottle. And so, for a lot of things within comics, it's why I always say it's dangerous to get into things like social issues and politics and climate change inside of comic books where you've got multiple dimensions and superheroes. I'm not saying you can't do that, because I've had a lot of people come at me saying, oh, you say you can't do that. Of course you can do it. You can do anything you want. But there's a concept of a two-way door and a one-way door. A two-way door is where you could tell a story and then you could put everything. I think Jonathan Hickman said it best once. You could put all the toys back in the toy box and move on. A one-way door is when you make such changes to the characters that whatever writer follows afterward can't, you have to live with some of the choices. If they, for example, had Mary Jane be the victim of sexual assault, and they've teased it a few times, by the way. When Venom first showed up in Amazing Spider-Man 299, there was a sense that Venom terrorized Mary Jane, and you weren't sure exactly what happened there, but, Mary Jane was hysterical and crying, and bad shit had gone down there. And so it was left a bit open to interpretation. Now, I don't think, Venom assaulted her, but definitely scared the bejesus out of her. But if you had instead in Amazing Spider-Man 299 spent, you know, 10 pages really, graphically showcasing this, and then in the comic books that followed, you had scenes of, Mary Jane having to recover from this, you would have had a forever different Mary Jane. You would have had a Spider-Man comic that was forever altered. And so you just have to think twice about these things before you go down that path. And so coming back to Andor for a moment, on one hand, I'm sorry, I'm relatively certain Star Wars universe has contemplated this shit and actually, more or less left the door open that some of this stuff was going on. Jabba was not trying to eat Leia in a cannibalistic sense. He was that he if you're an all, go watch those scenes. It's that's what's going. That it's not, they were implying something there. But because they weren't ultra graphic with it, because they weren't saying it out loud before, because they weren't hammering the point home, it allowed them some agency in basically kind of skirting the line and, more or less leaving it open to interpretation, which means, and it's hard for me to say George Lucas was a super gifted writer, but it's true. He basically was able to put a scene in, create some danger, create, an aspect to the comic, and then walk away from it without having lasting damage to Leia. And comic books have the same problem or the same responsibility. And that's really where the thing has changed. But I don't know. Let me know what you think. I'm sure this take is shitty and wrong, and you guys can all discuss it on Reddit. And thanks for listening.